before inviting formally inviting Dr. SAAD S KHAN, I would like to briefly give you some background information about him. Dr. SAAD S KHAN, PhD, is an officer of the Pakistan Administrative Service and is a widely published writer and analyst on democracy, law, and international politics, especially within the context of Muslim countries. His diverse academic interests extend to security and military studies and urban planning and design. Dr. Khan has up till now written 8 books, Reasserting International Islam, Finding Friends Indeed, Review and Reference on Pakistan-OIC Relations, Service, Our Highest Honor, Where Military Wages Peace, Military Bands and Diplomacy, War and Statecraft, Rati Jinnah, The Woman Who Stood Defiant. In addition, his 3 Urdu books on Quaid-e-Azam and freedom movement are titled as Quaid-e-Azam Ki Niji Zindagi, Maslak Shadi Aulad, Begum Maryam Jinnah, Qaid Ki Ehliya O Hamsafar, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Daulat, Jaidad or Wasiyat. This book he has written just recently, and if you read the Pakistani newspapers these days, many accomplished writers are also writing reviews about this book. And I have even last week, I think 2 or 3 leading columnists of in Pakistan have also commented on this book, and I have found it to be very interesting book. He has given lectures at different universities, and think tanks, including at Cambridge University, UK, and Cornell University here in the USA. Dr. Khan is a hobby collector and promoter of marching bands, and chairman of Marching Bands for Peace, a forum to promote army bands. He has so much accomplishments on his CV that I'm just highlighting some of them. Dr. Khan has also been a Fulbright scholar at Institute of Training and Development, Amherst, Massachusetts, USA. He is an alumni of International Academy of Leadership in Germany. He is also an alumni of prestigious Maritime Security Workshop from Naval War College. He has also done a course from École Nationale d'Administration in Paris. And he's also been a Cambridge OSI Trust Scholar at the University of Cambridge, UK. So with this, now I would invite Dr. SAAD S KHAN for his keynote talk and presentation on this important topic.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Consul General and Deputy Consul General, for a very flattering introduction. Let me. Right. So the topic given to me, I hope I will speak for about 32 minutes. And after that, if somebody has any questions, as the Consul General Sahab said, I would be very happy to answer. So today we are here to observe the Kashmir Solidarity Day with a lot of solemnity. And as you know, not only Pakistani community, but all people who love freedom all over the world are celebrating this day, observing this day together. That is the 5th of February. I'm extremely grateful to the Pakistan's diplomatic mission for having given me the opportunity to speak to you about this very important subject. So, as the Deputy Consul General has already explained, the topic would be Kashmir, past, present, and future. So the presentation today is distributed into 3 parts. One, the past of Kashmir, the present, that would be the second part, and future, that would be the third part. Look, so let's begin with the past. What happened and how Jammu and Kashmir became divided between India, Pakistan, and China, between the 3 countries. And from then we will move to the present situation. Right, so let's begin with the history of Kashmir. As you all know that the whole of India had Buddhist roots because Siddhartha, Gautam Buddha, was born here in Nepal, in the northern part of South Asia. And What is now Jammu and Kashmir for a considerable period, for a few centuries, used to be a Buddhist-dominated area. Then it converted into Hinduism, and Hindu Maharajas ruled in 1346. And then, after the advent of Islam, the next 5 centuries almost, from 1346 to 1819, this was under Muslim rule. And during that period of 5 centuries, a large majority of the population accepted Islam. A very famous Raja of Punjab, the first ruler of the Sikh dynasty in Punjab, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, defeated the Muslim Rajas of Kashmir and annexed the state of Kashmir into what was then Punjab. His cousin Zorawar Singh, who was also his general, captured the northern areas, which are now called the Gilgit-Baltistan of Pakistan. And we will talk about both these regions, Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, as we move forward in the next half an hour or so. Across the river of Chenab, on the eastern side, there was a state called Jammu, which was ruled by Dogra dynasty. And there was a Maharaja of Dogra dynasty called Gulab Singh, whose picture you can see here. And he offered the British to purchase the value of Kashmir for 75,000 rupees. And the British government agreed because Punjab was too large an area for them to rule. So those districts which the Punjab rulers had captured in the mountainous regions of Kashmir were sold out to the Dogra ruler of Jammu. And from thence, that is about 202 years ago, Jammu and Kashmir became a single entity. So the word Jammu and Kashmir with the sign "and" in between. So the Jammu ruler actually bought Kashmir from the British administration of Punjab, and so it was hyphenated with each other, Jammu and Kashmir, for the next 2 centuries. Now the British administration, as you might know, had 3 types of states. The biggest states, there were 562 princely states as on 14th August 1947, when Pakistan and India were, midnight between 14th and 15th August 1947, when Pakistan and India became independent. So the 20 or so largest states, including Bhavalpur, including Bhopal, Hyderabad, Deccan, Bhutan, etc., were called Category A states. And then there were smaller states, medium-sized states, which were called Category B states. And then there were very small states, which were called Category C states. And usually the British government had nothing to do with Category C states. And this will become very important as we discuss the history of Kashmir, because the smaller states, the Category C states on the Himalayan region, became tributary states of the Maharaja at Srinagar. And they are what is now called Gilgit-Baltistan, but we will come to that later. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan, was very fond of Kashmir. He even went on his second honeymoon to the valley of Jammu and Kashmir with his wife. And in fact, he visited Kashmir several times from 1926 to 1944. Jawaharlal Nehru, his family was a migrant from Kashmir who had settled in UP and in the city of Allahabad. And Jawaharlal Nehru was also very much fascinated with Kashmir, where his ancestral roots lied, and he was also a frequent visitor to Kashmir. And both Muslim League and Congress wanted to have their political presence in Kashmir. When we are talking about the past, we cannot forget talking about 2 very famous Kashmiri leaders. There was one called Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, a right-hand man of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who led the Muslim Conference, and this was a party which was allied to the cause of Pakistan, and Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas wanted Kashmir to accede to Pakistan. On your left, you can see Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, who was allied to the Congress, and he had to pay dearly for his allegiance to the Congress party, as we will see later, and even his descendants. His son was also Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah, and his grandson also Chief Minister of occupied Kashmir, Umar Farooq Abdullah, and his son and grandson are still in detention in the occupied Kashmir. So while these push and pull factors in Kashmir were going on, where 2 of the Major political parties, the National Conference and the Muslim Conference, were pulling Kashmir on the opposite side. And there was a third triangular effort by the Maharaja himself. Here you can see Maharaja Hari Singh, the last Maharaja of the state of Kashmir, who wanted to remain independent. He, just like two northern other, hereditary states, Nepal and Bhutan, did become independent. So he wanted it to be the third Himalayan state, which would neither be part of Pakistan nor of India. And for that purpose, he asked both Qaid-e-Azam and Nehruji that he wanted to wait and make up his mind. And he signed a standstill agreement both with Pakistan and with India, that for 1 year, there would be no change in the status of Jammu and Kashmir vis-a-vis India and vis-a-vis Pakistan, which means that all postal links, rail links, road links would continue as they did, and no trade would be affected. And within a year, as things settled down, the Maharaja thought he would be able to negotiate a better deal with either Pakistan or with India by playing one against the other. So now the people of Kashmir and against the Maharaja. But in the meantime, Maharaja had set two conditions with either country, whether he would, about the precondition that we wanted the country to agree to, India or Pakistan, before he would make up his mind to join either country. And that was that whichever country he joins, the country would have to agree that the government jobs in Kashmir would be reserved for Kashmiri people. So within the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the people from other promises of the country concerned, India, or as the case may be Pakistan, won't be given preference in government jobs. The second precondition was that there would be no non-Kashmiri would be allowed to own property or real estate in Kashmir. Right. So while these two conditions were being under consideration by the government of Pakistan, a civil war broke out in Kashmir, where some of the people thought that Kashmiris thought that Maharaja was cozying up with the government in New Delhi, and to preempt Maharaja's effort to play with their destiny, there was a rebellion, and there was an establishment of an Azad government of Jammu and Kashmir. Please note that it was not government of Jammu and Kashmir. It was Azad government of Jammu and Kashmir, which means the free government of Kashmir, not under the influence of Maharaja, which was established in Rawalpindi on 19 July 1947, about 25 days before the establishment of Pakistan itself. In the meantime, there was Gilgit rebellion, and those small states, like the Raja of Hunza or Mir of Nagar or Maharani of Saplu, and there were so many, Maharaja of Yasin Punyal. There were 14 small states, tributary states, which I told you in the beginning were called the category C states, which rebelled and decided to join Pakistan. So these category C states are now called Gilgit-Baltistan. And that part of Kashmir, as shown here in this map as green, is called the Azad Jammu and Kashmir. The part of Maharaja's rule directly, which has acceded to Pakistan, is called Azad Kashmir. And then there is some portion, as you can see on the north, which is under the control of China. Under the 1963 March Pakistan-China Accord, Pakistan has gifted some area, about 3% of the territory of the whole of Jammu and Kashmir, to China. And in the 1962 Aksai Chin War, 13% of the area of northern Ladakh, which Chinese call Aksai Chin, was captured by China, and Indian forces were defeated. In the meantime, Maharaja and the royal family, they fled to Amritsar, which is a small city near Lahore, because the opposition forces were closing in on Srinagar. And there he signed an instrument of accession with India on 24th October 1947, following which the Indian forces landed on Srinagar on 26th October 1947. At that time, we had an army chief in Pakistan named General Frank W. Messervy. You can see him on the top right of the picture. And he was very reluctant to send Pakistani forces there, saying that since Both Indian and Pakistani forces had British officers. So he said that he did not see it morally correct that British officers should fire on British officers. And so he asked Quaid-e-Azam to withdraw his orders. That delay, that prevarication by the Chief of Army Staff proved fatal for Pakistan because the Indian forces strengthened their positions, and the irregulars fighting them were no match for regular armed forces. So actually, General Frank W. Messervy was of course sacked from his command, and General Sir Douglas Gracie, whom you can see in the at the bottom right, became Pakistan's second Chief of Army Staff, and then the war started, and it lasted for about 8 or 9 months till the United Nations introduced ceasefire on 5th January 1949 at the request of India. India took the matter to the UN Security Council, and there a ceasefire was offered to both countries, provided both countries agreed to the concept of plebiscite, that the people of Kashmir would decide their future, and both countries agreed, and a ceasefire was enacted. So in a way, the Maharaja's accession, the document itself was provisional, because Maharaja did not say that it was the final accession to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. He wanted some more time. There were two conditions set by Maharaja for that provisional accession till the United Nations decided whether Kashmir is part of one country or the other. And those two conditions, that no non-Kashmiri would be given jobs in Kashmir, and that no non-Kashmiri would be entitled to own property in Kashmir, was consecrated under Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. And this 370 becomes very important in the past 2 years, as I am going to speak about it. The pro-Pakistan provisional government in Rawalpindi, established in 19 July, did not accede to Pakistan because of certain moral, political, and legal reasons that I am going to explain in the next slide. However, Pakistan government accepted the two conditions, that civil service of Kashmir would remain mostly limited to the people of Kashmir, and the Pakistanis other than those who are the state citizens would not be entitled to buy property in Kashmir. So Pakistan not only signed the agreement of what is called Karachi Agreement of 1949, but it also sanctified the special status of Kashmir through Article 257 of the 1973 Constitution. So India's Article 370 and Pakistan's Constitution's Article 257 give the special status to the respective parts of Kashmir which are in the control of India or Pakistan. Both constitutional provisions in the Constitution of India of 1950 and that of Constitution of Pakistan of 1973 clearly say that these provisions are temporary in nature. Now, why cannot Pakistan or any civil, democracy living country accept the accession, what the Indians call the accession of Kashmir to India? Because of 6 reasons. And these 6 reasons are very important. Because under the 3rd June plan of the Viceroy, the accession either to India or to Pakistan had to be in a free and fair manner. That the Maharaja or Nawab of the ruler of the state concerned, there were 562 priestly states, shouldn't be under pressure. So when Maharaja was in a house arrest in Amritsar, far away from Kashmir, it couldn't be said that he was free of pressure from India or from Pakistan, at least not from India. So it was not a free and fair accession that could be morally or politically or diplomatically be justified. The second thing was that accession could be signed by the state or for the state or area under one's full control. And since Maharaja had lost control even of the capital Srinagar from where he had run away, so how could he give away Kashmir to India or to any other country for that matter, which was not under his physical control? He wasn't safe in the city, in his palace, and he had run away. So how could, sitting in Amritsar, he could give away Kashmir, which was no longer his? Because in the previous 3 months, the Dogra forces had lost against the uprising by the freedom fighters. The third thing is that the 5th January 1949 resolution and the earlier resolutions, for example, of 21st April 1948, and the resolution establishing UNCIP, they had made it very clear that the solution of the Kashmir lies in plebiscite. And that's what Pakistan's stated position is, That's what the Prime Minister of Pakistan has said today, the message right out here in this webinar, and that's what the Consul General was saying at the moment, some time ago. That UN resolution is not a menu card. You cannot pick and choose some parts of UN resolution and ignore some other parts of UN resolution. UN resolution has to be taken in its totality, even if it is under Chapter 6 and not under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. So morally, diplomatically, no country can say that we have accepted UN resolution to accomplish the ceasefire because Pakistani forces were closing in on Srinagar, and then refuse the second part or the third part of the resolution about the plebiscite. Then there is a very much established principle under international law and sanctified since the ICJ, International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion of 1974 in the France nuclear test case. And it has been again and again clarified by the PCIJ, the Permanent Court of International Justice, in multiple cases, that unilateral declarations by a state create a legal obligation. If a head of state or a head of government or a foreign minister makes a statement on behalf of a country, then it creates an obligation, legal obligation for that country, and the country cannot wriggle out unilaterally from it. So the three letters that the Consul General just read out from the Prime Minister of India have unequivocally, in the eyes of International Court of Justice judgments and the established principles of international law as it exists today, have created an obligation over India, which the successor prime ministers could not unilaterally withdraw from. Number 5, there is again a settled principle of international law and international diplomacy, which is called pacta sunt servanda, which means that all agreements are bound to be observed by both parties in good faith, or by all parties if that's a multilateral treaty in good faith. And in the presence of standstill agreement of Maharaja Bir India or Pakistan, neither country could ask him to sign an instrument of accession, and before the lapse of the standstill agreement, such a pressure was illegal, immoral, and undiplomatic. And finally, the basic formula of partition was that all Muslim states or Muslim provinces or Muslim districts have to go to Pakistan and non-Muslim majority areas to India. That particular principle was applied not by Pakistan but India itself in case of Junagadh. And in Hyderabad, saying that even the Maharaja of Junagadh was a Muslim, but since the population was Hindu, and that's why they intervened militarily in Hyderabad and militarily in Junagadh, they had, if they think that this was the basis of partition, and this was valid for Hyderabad and Junagadh, and the rest of India and the rest of Pakistan, then it was also valid for Kashmir. So these 6 legal and political arguments are so strong that Indian position is very weak when it comes to the legal position on the instrument of accession or their position on the issue of plebiscite. The constitutional developments on both sides, as you all know, that the upper flag is the flag of the Azad government of Jammu and Kashmir, which already, although it sits in Muzaffarabad, but technically represents the whole of Jammu and Kashmir. The Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir that the President of Pakistan was addressing a few hours ago today represents not only the Pakistani side of the line of control, which means the Azad Jammu and Kashmir, the AJK, but technically the Kashmir Valley and Jammu as well. And that is why there are seats to be filled that are filled in Pakistan's in the Azad Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, which represent occupied Kashmir also and occupied Jammu, and they are elected by the Mahajirin, the settlers, the refugees from Indian occupied areas who have fled the persecution and now taking shelter in Pakistan. Pakistan introduced the provisional constitution of Jammu and Kashmir in 1974, and that is the operational instrument for Jammu and Kashmir. In India, the constitution was adopted in 17 November 1956 and came into force on 26 January 1957, and that was revoked, abrogated unilaterally in 2019, and I will come to that later in the second half of my discourse. Just like Pakistan had a president and a prime minister of Kashmir, Pakistan in fact has 2 presidents, one of the state of Pakistan and other of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. India had a similar mirror position till 1965. And the Sadr-e-Riyasat, the president of the state, who was Karan Singh, incidentally, the son and crown prince of the last Maharaja Hari Singh, he was called the Sadr-e-Riyasat, president of the state, And then there was an office of the Prime Minister. Both of these offices were abolished in India by the Indian administration in 1965. And that was one of the major reasons that led to a contributing factor that led to the armed conflict between India and Pakistan in the same year, that is 1965. The situation in India, the status remains that there was an uprising in 1947 for accession to Pakistan led by Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas. And then there were violent protests after Hazratbal incident in 1962. I can talk about these incidents in Q&A session maybe, and the present movement, which has remained unabated for 32 long years. The uprising that started in 1989 has led to 83,000 deaths so far, and the presence of 700,000 security personnel, including the Jammu and Kashmir police, the Border Security Force, the Central Reserve Police Force, CRPF, and of course the Indian Army. And this is how they treat the Kashmiris. And 83,000 of them have died. So that's was something that I wanted to talk to you about, how we came to the present day. Now, at present, there is Pakistan has two parts of what used to be called Kashmir, the state of Jammu and Kashmir. One is the Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is north of Punjab and east of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in you can say a crescent manner. This is the Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which has about 4 million population and 13,297 square kilometers. So it's nearly 1.6% of Pakistan in terms of area, and 16% of the Pakistani controlled part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and 6% of the total dominions of the Maharaja. If the total area is counted, the one which is under Chinese administration, the one which is under illegal Indian occupation, and the one which is controlled by the Azad government of Jammu and Kashmir. So 6% of that comes to is part of what is now called Azad Jammu and Kashmir. So it's 400 kilometers long from north to south, a crescent which is anywhere between 15 to 65 kilometers wide at different places in Kashmir. So under the 1974 constitution, there's a president, the prime minister. It has a separate flag, as you have seen. It has a separate Senate and upper house, which is called the AJK Council. It has a legislative assembly. Pakistan National Assembly's legislation does not extend to Azad Jammu and Kashmir unless the Jammu and Kashmir legislative assembly itself makes the law to that effect or on that matter. Azad Jammu and Kashmir has a separate Supreme Court and a separate civil service, of course, separate flag, and except those areas, defense, currency, and foreign affairs, which have been mutually agreed under 1949 agreement between the government of Kashmir and government of Pakistan that Pakistan would take care of. It has a very high literacy rate, 18% higher than Pakistan. The present enrollment rate is male 98%, female 92%, which means that adult literacy rate would be 98% within 10 to 15 years when the present school population becomes adults, and in the next census they are counted as adults. So it would be near universal education as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. It has a very strong tourism potential. Many people of Kashmir, in some areas like Mirpur, etc., at least 1 or 2% from every household lives somewhere in Belgium or United Kingdom or Scandinavia, and a large number of foreign remittances, very high tourism potential. And the most beautiful thing compared to the other side of line of control is that almost no crime, no bomb blasts, no sectarian issue, no law and order problem. Most of the police are called Rangers police because they are more or less concerned with rescue duties due to continuous border violations on the line of control. And in many thanas, the only FIR in the whole year is not of a murder or dacoity or some hard crime, but of a loss of the passport or identity card document. कि जी मेरा शनाख्ती कार्ड गुम गया है, मुझे नया बनवाना है, तो उसकी FIR क्योंकि शर्त होती है नया बनवाने के लिए. So that's how the Pakistani part of Kashmir is going. But the sad part is that, for example, there were 6,200 alleged violations in 2019 alone, for which the figures are available. For the figures of 2020 would be available by the end of this month, inshallah. And 6,200 violations. And given the situation that it's a long, narrow strip within 15 to 65 kilometers of of the line of control means that 1 million of the 4 million people of Azad Kashmir live within 10 kilometers of the LOC, which means within artillery range. 17 out of 29 Jammu Kashmir Legislative Assembly constituencies lie on LOC. And then there were one major challenge that Kashmir faced was a natural disaster, the earthquake of 2005. Otherwise, Kashmir is something like a paradise on earth and one of the most beautiful places in South Asia and probably the whole world. It's very rich in culture, very rich in cuisine, very rich in music. And because of, as I said, very high literacy rate and high remittances, this is how Kashmir, the free Kashmir looks like at present. And this is Jammu and Kashmir police band, Muzaffarabad police band on the right. On the left, it's a view from the PC Muzaffarabad, Pearl Continental Muzaffarabad, the night sky of the city of Muzaffarabad. Before we move to the present, let me talk a little about Gilgit-Baltistan, because 5/6 of the territory of Maharaja's dominions that are allied with Pakistan is Gilgit-Baltistan. 1/6 is Kashmir. Azad Jammu and Kashmir only 13,000 kilometers, but 72,971 kilometers of what I told you were category C princely states, small princely states, not directly ruled by Maharaja himself, but for their relation with the British government, they had to go through the court of Srinagar. So area-wise, it's almost 1/10 of Pakistan, the area of Gilgit-Baltistan. But population is so small, 1.4 billion, 1.44 million, 14,40,000, which is probably 1/10 of the population of city of Lahore. Administrative development in Gilgit-Baltistan has taken place, which has climaxed under the Gilgit-Baltistan Self-Governance Ordinance, where they have a separate governor, separate chief minister. They have their legislative assembly, their high courts, their supreme courts. It's also gateway to China and therefore gateway to CPAC. And of course, it has slightly different culture from Azad Kashmir, but there are certain very strong points like gender equality, especially among the Ismaili community. The first governor, Shama Khalid of Gilgit-Baltistan, had also been a woman, and a very rich tradition of marching music, road infrastructure. You can see on the right the Karakoram Highway, which is also called the eighth wonder of the world, and on the left you can see the Baltit Fort, one of the most beautiful forts in Jammu in Gilgit-Baltistan area. Now come to the third part, which is under the administrative control of India. India lost 38% of Jammu and Kashmir to Pakistan, where only irregulars were fighting against regular Indian troops. I told you that Pakistani forces' presence there was delayed because of certain opinion of the then Chief of Army Staff, who was then sacked, who was a British officer, of course. India was also badly defeated in 1962 war with China, and 16% was lost to China. So India is already, with the Pakistan-China axis, a minority stakeholder as far as Kashmir is concerned. So they have now 12 million population with 68% Muslims in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, India's state of Jammu and Kashmir is divided into three parts. For example, Kashmir. Most of the violence and the freedom struggle is the strongest in what is called the Kashmir Valley, because the Kashmir mountains, which are under the government of free government of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, based in Muzaffarabad, the valley is under Indian occupation, which is only 15% of the area under Indian control. 15% of the state under Indian control, but 53% of the population. So this 53% of the population, out of 12 million, it's about 6.5 million live in this valley, very congested area, and 94% of the valley, people of the valley are Muslims. Then there is Jammu. It's 25% of the Indian occupied area, but only 43% of the population. Sorry, I have written 43, 45, it is 40, yes, 45. 45% of the population, and the Muslim ratio of this 45 is 34%. And finally, there is a big Ladakh region, which is 58.8. I have managed to whole number kar diya. It's nearly 60% of the area, where only 2% of the population live, 250,000 people. of which almost half are Muslims. So if we count 94% of this 53%, and then 45%, 34% of this 45% Jammu population, and almost half of this 2%, Muslims come to almost 68%. And the scenes you can see day in and day out are part only of the Muslim majority areas of Kashmir. And in Pakistan or any other civilized country, if this treatment is meted out on animals, the United Nations and many other international organizations would come to the rescue of the victims. But this is something that happens day in and day out, and there is no need to show more slides because we all know that. And this is a question mark on the world conscience. So before I end, maybe I will take another 5 or 6 minutes. Sorry for that. So Indian actions in occupied Kashmir, the Article 370 of that gave the two guarantees to the people of Kashmir that that the Maharaja had made a precondition of the so-called instrument of accession. Although that instrument was morally wrong, and I have given the 6 reasons in the opening slides. But even if it was true, it was based on 2 conditions. And if Article 370 is abrogated unilaterally, it means those conditions have been withdrawn unilaterally, which means that instrument of accession, even if it was there, has become infructuous. So that is something very important, because now the issue has moved beyond the issue of human rights. Much water has flown under the bridges. International law has moved on. What is happening here in this slides is not a violation of human rights. It's a torture out and out. So now the international legal regime of crimes against humanity, the Convention Against Torture, CAT, the Convention Against Genocide, those are the things that Pakistan needs to emphasize on. Not the UDHR, because the things have moved beyond simple violation of human rights. This is not a violation of human rights going on. This is an ethnic cleansing going on. So if Gambia can go to the International Court of Justice against Rohingya Muslims on the other part of the globe, so Pakistan has a much stronger case. So in the last 2 or 3 minutes, I will talk about the future. Was Article 370 temporary in nature? Yes, it was. But what happened on 5th August 2019, that temporariness has ended. 5 अगस्त 2019 को क्या हो गया था जिसकी वजह से 370 खत्म करना पड़ा? Was the Kashmir issue resolved? No, it was not. It could not be arbitrarily removed any one day of the whole calendar whenever the government at New Delhi felt like. It was provisional only in the sense that Kashmir issue is yet to be resolved. And when it would be resolved, of course, Article 370 would be infructuous. So it could only be revoked by the people of Kashmir or their assembly or their government, because the very constitution of 1956 had been made by the people of Kashmir. What India did was that they dismissed the government of Madam Mufti on the right and appointed a governor sent from Delhi, and the Delhi's representative governor in Srinagar, on behalf of the people of Kashmir, whom he had no right to represent, asked the Indian president to abrogate the special status of Kashmir, which he did. So this is totally ridiculous. This is a violation of India's own constitution. But one thing that we have failed to highlight is that any international agreement is binding on both parties in good faith, pacta sunt servanda, which is the basic principle of international relations and international law and international morality and international civility. And what does Simla Agreement say? The 2 countries are resolved to settle their differences through peaceful means, through bilateral negotiations or any other peaceful means mutually agreed upon by them. So when Indians say that UN ka role khatam ho gaya hai because Pakistan has agreed that there will be bilateral negotiations only, it is not the case. It's bilateral negotiations or any other peaceful means agreed to between the parties, which includes UN Security Council. Because United Nations Charter itself says that every issue should be settled in the first place bilaterally, and if it is not, you fail to solve it bilaterally, then come to us, then come to the Security Council. So this is not a different wording. This is wording which is there in every peace treaty between North and South Cyprus, between North and South Ireland, between North and South Korea, and that is why between North and between Pakistan and India on Kashmir over Simla dispute. So Pakistan has not foregone the option of going to United Nations. The exact wording says bilateral negotiation or any other peaceful means. Pending the final settlement of the problem, neither side shall unilaterally alter the situation. That's again Simla agreement. Not my opinion, not anybody else's opinion. That's a solemn agreement signed between Pakistan and India. So India could not, cannot legally, morally, and under this treaty unilaterally alter the situation of Kashmir by abrogating Kashmir's constitution. And both sides shall prevent all acts detrimental to maintenance of peaceful and harmonious relations. Again, Simla agreement, which they have violated. So what has happened is that India has sleepwalked into a political and moral and diplomatic abyss. India says Kashmir is an integral part of India. In Hindi, or they say Kashmir India ka toot ang hai. Where did this word atut ang come from? It was not written in the Constitution of India in 1950. Even in Pakistan Constitution of 1973, it does not say that Pakistan, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of Pakistan. We only say under Article 257 in our Constitution that its status will be determined by the relevant UN resolutions. So the word atut had come from Article 3 of the Constitution of Occupied Kashmir that Indians have now abrogated. So the only legal link, the only document that said that Kashmir is a part of India has been abrogated by India itself. The red flag has gone away. The special position of Kashmir has gone away, the occupied Kashmir, and the constitution has gone away, which means whatever legal or moral claim they had, that there was a document linking Jammu and Kashmir with India, they have disposed it of themselves. So what will happen in future? If everybody comes to Kashmir to get government jobs, and the largest source of employment in occupied Kashmir is government jobs, unlike in Pakistan where there's so many other things, then joblessness and alienation of Kashmiri youth will increase. The vulnerability of Hindu population when more and more people from other parts of India would come and buy property in Srinagar would increase. And the way they have, relegated the status of Jammu and Kashmir from being a state to a mere union territory directly controlled by Delhi means that all promises of India, all they are called states in India, would be afraid of, the central government, whether the democracy. So is Kashmir's, destiny with Pakistan? Likely so. So the New Delhi government has moved into a cul-de-sac of their own choosing, of their own creation. The abrogation of Constitution of India is a violation. The abrogation of Article 370 is a violation of the Constitution itself of India, and of the Simla agreements, and of the UN resolutions. No Kashmiri leader, from Mehbooba Mufti to Umar Abdullah to Farooq Abdullah, can now stand before their people defending India's actions. So those political leadership who had their fortunes with India, they have left them speechless. उन्होंने तो अपने allies के नीचे से ही कालीन खींच लिया है. महबूबा मुफ्ती वोट नहीं ले सकती है, वो क्या कहेगी कि इंडिया ने हमारे लिए क्या किया है, ये स्पेशल स्टेटस भी तो छीन लिया है. So all legal linkages and bridges with Kashmir have been destroyed. So that's how the situation stands now, and that's how I see the future. So the house is open for questions, if any. That's all that I had to say.